what is the worst-selling Zelda game? Or how about the least successful Mario platformer? Today, I'm going to be uncovering some of the worst-selling Nintendo games of all time. From the Zelda game which only sold 100,000 copies, to the 3DS game which never even hit the sales charts. By the end of this video, you'll be an expert on some of Nintendo's biggest failures. First, let's talk about Animal Crossing. And of the main series, the worst-selling game is actually the original Animal Crossing for the GameCube, having sold 2.92 million copies. Nowadays, everyone loves Animal Crossing, but in 2001, a game about doing chores was a difficult sell. Game reviewer IGN wrote, "Animal Crossing arrives on GameCube with all the trimmings that usually make games flop. An unknown license, so-so graphics, mediocre sound, and game mechanics that sound more like chores than fun." Still, what about the spin-offs? Well, the worst-selling game in the entire series is Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival for the Wii U, which sold a staggeringly low 88,000 copies in Japan. Nintendo never published global sales for the game. So why so low? Well, Amiibo Festival was widely regarded as a bad game. It's boring and not especially creative either. And perhaps as a result, the game bombed. Next, let's talk about Mario Kart. And the lowest selling main series Mario Kart is Super Circuit for the Game Boy Advance. It still managed to sell an impressive 5.91 million copies though. It's just every Mario Kart game sells millions, so the bar is really high. If you include spin-off games though, then the lowest selling game of the series becomes Mario Kart Live Home Circuit for the Nintendo Switch. This is kind of a gimmick game, albeit one with a really cool gimmick. You drive real-life remote-controlled Mario Karts around your living room, and with sales of 1.27 million, the game did really well considering how niche it is. Just goes to show how absurdly well Mario Kart games sell. Next up is Zelda. Now, taking a look at just the main series Zelda games, the worst seller is Four Swords Adventures for the GameCube. This game sold 758,000 copies in America and Japan. European sales haven't been reported. Now, this game is one of the only multiplayer Zelda games, and I think perhaps because you need to round up a group of players to start a game, Four Swords Adventures never took off much in terms of sales. If you look at every single Zelda game though, then the one with the lowest sales is Ripened Tingle's Balloon Trip of Love for the Nintendo DS. You've probably never heard of this game, and that's because it only came out in Japan. Perhaps as a result, it only sold 108,000 copies. Next up is Super Smash Bros. And out of the entire series, the worst seller is Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, which isn't really a surprise. The Wii U is one of the worst selling consoles Nintendo has released, and so Super Smash Bros. For Wii U is going to be limited in its sales potential. Still, a sales figure of 5.38 million is actually very impressive on a console that only sold about 13 million units. That's about half of Wii U owners who bought Smash. Next, let's talk about Mario Party. But first, I need to explain something I discovered while working on this video. If a game sells less than 1 million copies, it's really hard to find specific numbers for how many copies it did sell around the world. So, there are 3 Mario Party games that failed to sell 1 million copies. Mario Party Star Rush and Mario Party The Top 100 for 3DS, and Mario Party Advance for the GBA. And you might have noticed something in common between those 3 games. They're all handheld games, which makes sense. Mario Party is absolutely the type of game you play while sitting in front of your TV. Looking at Japanese sales data, the worst-selling game of the 3 is Star Rush, reaching a final sales figure of 197,000 copies. Next up is Kirby. Now, sadly, a lot of Kirby games haven't hit 1 million copies, and like I said, that makes finding good data pretty difficult. So for this part of the video, I'm just going to be talking about physical games sold in Japan. So, out of every single Kirby game, the one with the least sales is Kirby Fighters Deluxe for the 3DS, with a staggeringly small 17,400 copies sold in Japan. However, there are a few caveats there, as most people who bought the game likely bought a digital copy, not a physical one, and that sales figure doesn't include digital sales. Still, 17,000 copies is a very low number indeed. However, if we're just talking main series Kirby games, then the one with the lowest sales by a fairly large margin is Kirby's Dream Land 3 for the SNES, with sales of only 76,000 in Japan. This is a major numbered entry in the Kirby series, so you might be surprised to see it at the bottom. But check out when the game was released. November of 1997, more than a year after the Nintendo 64 was released. In other words, Kirby's Dream Land 3 was released on an already outdated console. It's no wonder it didn't sell that well. Next, let's talk Pokemon. And things get a little complicated when you try and talk about Pokemon sales. You see, almost every Pokemon generation has a pair of games like Red and Blue, and then often a third game that comes out later like Yellow, and then usually a set of remakes like Fire Red and Leaf Green, and sometimes another set of remakes like Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which makes counting sales a little complicated. So I think the best way to determine which Pokemon generation is the most and least successful is to ignore all of that and just look at the first games of the generation. No Pokemon Yellow, no Black and White 2 or Ultra Sun and Moon, just the initial games that came out from that generation. Which means the lowest seller is Pokemon Legends Arceus, the most recent Pokemon game, and the only main series Pokemon game without a pair. Now, the game was released pretty recently, so I'm sure sales will continue to climb. But as of writing, Legends Arceus has sold 12.64 million copies. However, if you count Arceus as a spin-off, then the lowest selling Pokemon games are Black and White, which sold 15.64 million copies. That is a huge number, and just goes to show that for a series like Pokemon, whose lowest selling games sold 12 and 15 million copies, every game in this series sells unbelievably well. Second to last, let's talk about Metroid. Now, like Kirby, there have been quite a few Metroid games that didn't reach 1 million copies, but there's one game that sold far less than every other game in the series, Metroid Prime Federation Force for the 3DS. In Japan, the game sold only 6,090 physical copies. Now, the game received very negative reviews, so I'm not surprised to see it at the bottom of the list. But still, 6,000 copies is just unbelievably bad. Nintendo very much could have used these sales as a reason to stop making Metroid games. I'm glad that didn't happen though. And finally, let's talk about Super Mario. And the worst selling Super Mario game is the Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2, aka the Lost Levels. Now, this game was originally only released in Japan, plus you needed a special add-on for the console to even play it. So a lot of people who might have otherwise bought this game just couldn't. Still, with sales of 2.65 million, Mario 2 was no flop by any means. But if you compare it to the original Super Mario Bros., which sold over 40 million copies, Mario 2 didn't quite reach those heights. Now, if you want to exclude Mario 2 from the list because it was only sold in Japan, then the worst selling Super Mario game becomes New Super Luigi U, with sales of 3.07 million. And Luigi U really had everything against it in terms of sales. It was released on the Wii U, one of the worst selling consoles Nintendo's released, plus it was this strange add-on level pack thing for another Mario game, New Super Mario Bros. U. So this game is very unique, and it was a fun experiment Nintendo tried, but in terms of sales at least, it wasn't really a success. And there we have it, the worst selling games from some of Nintendo's biggest series. So let that be a lesson for you. Even if right now you're at your ripened Tingles balloon trip of love, right around the corner, your Breath of the Wild may just be waiting for you. Thanks for watching. I make videos about Nintendo's history every single week, so subscribe so that you don't miss a video. And I'll see you next time. Bye!